This is the Doing Business School Abroad podcast. I'm Ken Globerman, and if you're interested in going to business school somewhere out of your country, this is definitely the podcast series for you. Episode 10, your CV. Welcome back to the Doing Business School Abroad podcast series. We are up to episode 10 already, and today we are going to talk about writing a killer CV. Now, for those of you who are in the U.S., you're probably saying, what the hell is CV? CV is just the term most of the world uses for resume, right? CV stands for curriculum vitae, which nobody says. But I'll refer to it as CV for this episode. But just so those of you in the United States know, I'm talking about the good old resume. Okay. So if you've applied for any job, hopefully you've done some research on how to write a good CV. And for business school applications, it's really not that different. Okay. So I'm going to talk kind of generally about what are some of the do's and don'ts with a CV, which would translate really well also to writing your professional CV. And I'll make a few points, though, where I might see some differences between your personal, your academic and your professional CV. So your CV is like a business card for yourself, just in a long format, right? What is typically on a CV? Obviously, some of your basic data points, like your contact information. A lot of times now people, particularly out of the U.S., put their photograph on their CV, though in the U.S. this is less common. So I think you may want to check with the school you're applying to see if they have a specific format that they like to see you submit your CV in. Some schools even have like their own format online that you'll want to check. So please check that out. If they give you license to write your CV the way you wish to, let me give you a few pointers here. First of all, your CV is your calling card. This is not about telling your entire life story and your professional track record since since before high school. Focus on the highlights. Secondly, definitely if you're applying to business school and you have hardly 2 to 3 years of work experience, your CV should absolutely be 1 page. There is no reason to have a 2-page resume for anybody without at least 10 years of work experience. Okay, so focus on getting all the information out there on 1 page. Further, don't use 8-point font all over the place. You don't want to have a situation where the person who's evaluating your application has to use a magnifying glass to read things. You don't want them squinting, okay? Focus on 10-point, 11-point font, maybe even 12-point font, just to kind of keep things, just to give you some numbers. White space is a good thing. Less is more. You don't need to pack it in. You need to be, you need really succinct, powerful bullet points. Now let's talk about the content format, okay? So obviously mentioned already, somewhere at the top, or if you want to use a more modern design, perhaps off to the side is your data information. You want to, if you're applying to grad school, to business school, probably your education is going to be the first thing you highlight because you probably don't have a ton of work experience yet. So your education is going to be prominently displayed. What school you went to, where was it, what degree you graduated with. Obviously, anything that distinguishes you in that school. If you were the president of a particular students club or a vice president, you want to include that. If you have an exceptionally good GPA, you want to include that, and things along those lines, right? So you're not putting your high school education here. You're putting simply your undergraduate 4-year degree education in this slot. If you have another master's degree, of course, that would go here as well. From the professional perspective, you want to obviously highlight your current job and then any jobs that you've had. And probably most of you who are applying to business school don't have more than 5 to 7 years of experience. So you don't want to you don't want to stick on your resume that you had a lemonade stand when you were 12 years old, right? This is for work that you've done since you've been, let's say, 18 years old, alongside your undergraduate program. So many people have done internships while they were in undergrad. That will be something to highlight. You also would want to highlight any work that you've been doing since undergrad here. So I think the key thing to point out here is you want to focus, when you describe your job, you want to focus on skills that you developed and value you brought to that company, right? So always keep that in mind in terms of describing what you've done at whatever particular job that was. What did you achieve there? And provide metrics where you can. For example, if you led a team of 5 analysts on a particular project, that could be something to highlight. Quantifiable numbers. If you brought in a new client who spent X thousand euro in revenue, that's something to highlight. If you successfully completed 12 projects over the course of the summer and an internship, that's something to highlight. You want to have lead your bullet points with strong action words, such as developed, planned, organized, led, orchestrated, things like that. These are some of the important words. People like to see strong action words at the start of your bullets that describe what it is you've done. So keep that in mind. Beyond that, you want to think about how you can stand out beyond your work experience. So you might have some other, especially if this is a CV for a business school, you may want to include some of the related coursework that you've done in your undergraduate studies that would be relevant here. If you're really strong quantitatively and you think that program is going to see that as a gold star, then include, your statistics class, perhaps your probability class, econometrics. So, think about for a CV for a business school of including some highlighted coursework that you've done. I wouldn't recommend that for a professional CV, but it was something I would consider for a CV for a grad school application. Beyond that, think about some other personal things you want to get kind of bring across here as well. Something, though, this is part of your overall application. You've got your essays and all the other stuff. You can also perhaps at the bottom of the page include some volunteer work that you've done that you find that really is meaningful to you. Perhaps you can include languages you speak. Perhaps you can also include other particular skills that you have. And this is where you would include some of that information. So that's really a summary. I mean, it's only one page, right? So I'm not going to say too much more than that about this, but it is an important part of the application. I don't think it's a top 3 or 4 thing, but it's something not to be, it's something to definitely pay attention to, and you want to get this right. So again, your CV, one page. Don't use tiny font. Make sure you've got plenty of white space to make it appealing on the eyes. Describe your work experience using strong action verbs and metrics that are quantifiable to demonstrate the value that you've brought to the organization you worked for. Make sure in there that you've got some of the skills that you've developed that are translatable to business school. And then include any other courses that you may want to highlight, volunteer work or personal touches or accents that you want to bring, that you want to make sure you got communicated to the reader. Okay. So that's the summary of that. I hope that you appreciated this podcast episode. Our next episode, we'll talk about the admissions interview process. And in advance of that, I wish you a fabulous day. And at this point, this is Ken signing off. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.